Welcome to the Shield database. Please enter your access code. Welcome, Agent. Most superheroes and vigilantes in the Marvel Universe occasionally have to confront death. Whether that be by accepting their own mortality, losing a loved one, or being forced to cross a line and take a life. Daredevil is no exception and seems to be locked in a cycle of meeting new people, forming a relationship with them and then watching them breathe their last. With very few exceptions, the people in the orbit of the Man Without Fear seem to have a limited time on Earth. The moment may take many years to arrive, but equally may come much sooner. These deaths are never easy to brush off, and more often than not will lead to an existential crisis within Daredevil, making him question if what he is doing is worth all he has lost. Of course, it always becomes clear that the greater good is what is really important, and that ultimately, the more Daredevil patrols Hell's Kitchen, the less blood can soak its streets. Here are 10 stories in which characters meet their end. Spoilers ahead. In his early days as a costumed vigilante, the Man Without Fear refused to let anyone know of his secret identity. That's why it was particularly upsetting when Karen and Foggy accidentally learned the truth. While this revelation could have infused some serious drama into the proceedings, Matt chose instead to steer the narrative into wackier territory, brushing off Karen and Foggy's claims and inventing a twin brother so that he had someone else to point the finger at. This conceit lasted for many issues but eventually came to an end when things began to get too complicated between himself, his twin brother, and Karen Page, the woman he loved. When fighting the man who would go on to become the Deathstalker, Daredevil was able to fake his own death and as a result, kill off his fake twin brother, who would not appear again for almost 50 years. This is possibly the only death experienced by Matt Murdock which left him with nothing more than an overwhelming sense of relief. The death of Jean DeWolf is arguably the greatest Daredevil story not told within the pages of a Daredevil book. It revolves around a serial killer who murders close friends of both Daredevil and Spider-Man and shows the reader how even the most heroic men can become cold, angry monsters if given the right push. While the death of his friend, Horace Rosenthal, pushes the Man Without Fear to seek out justice while still honoring the code he lives by, the death of Spider-Man's friend, Jean DeWolf, deeply affects the hero who sets out for retribution by any means necessary. Spider-Man here is more brutal than we have ever seen him, and it is implied that if not for Daredevil's intervention, the wall crawler could very easily have taken the life of the serial killer, an action Daredevil is keenly aware would have a devastating impact on his friend once he regained his rationality. The story shows Daredevil's belief that killing a killer is never the right course of action. After Matt's identity as Daredevil was exposed to the public, he was arrested and imprisoned. The villains imprisoned alongside him, however, could not reach him in his protected wing of the prison, and so, to send a message, had Foggy Nelson stabbed on his way out after visiting Matt. From his cell there was nothing Matt could do but use his super hearing to listen to Foggy get murdered, and his heart began to slow as the life drained out of him. Matt was permitted to attend the funeral where an enraged Rosalind Sharp, Foggy's mother, blamed him for what happened. The guilt was so overwhelming that it caused Matt to beat down every man in the prison until he discovered the culprit, even going as far as to break out alongside the Punisher to continue his pursuit of vengeance. It was eventually revealed, however, that Foggy's death was faked by Vanessa Mariana, who had decided to resolve all of her outstanding debts before succumbing to a terminal illness. Her death, however, is another story for another time. Gloriana O'Brien was an Irish woman living in New York and working at the Daily Bugle. Her position there often led to her being placed into life-threatening situations, and as a result she soon met both Daredevil and Matt Murdock. O'Brien and Murdoch found themselves attracted to each other and soon developed a romance which proved fruitless when O'Brien became tired of Matt's frequent and unexplained absences. Gloriana broke off contact with Matt but soon found herself romantically involved with his best friend Foggy Nelson. Sometime later, when Matt was believed dead, Gloriana visited the supposed crime scene in order to find some justice for her former lover. It was here, however, that she was ambushed by Victor Crueler and thrown from the window of a high-rise apartment. As she plummeted to her death, her thoughts drifted to Daredevil, hoping that he would swing in at any second to save her. However, he never appeared. Matt was in fact miles away, and when he learned of her death from the television, he broke down briefly before setting out to find justice. A death which shows Matt's respect for the law is sometimes capable of blinding him to his own morality. When a child was murdered in Redemption Valley, Matt was hired to defend the suspected killer. Joel Flood, a teenager who was the center of a witch hunt, the people of Redemption had constructed due to their grief and disgust. Matt was soon able to deduce that Flood was innocent, however, and defended him in court to the best of his abilities. The system failed Flood, however, and he was sentenced to death. 7 years passed before the execution took place, and Matt attended out of obligation to the boy he failed. Joel was aware that Murdoch and Daredevil were one and the same, and much like Gloriana, he died hoping that the masked vigilante was about to burst in and save him. Matt's respect for the courts, however, prevented any such action, and Joel drifted away. Matt was eventually able to find the real killer, thus proving Flood's innocence. However, it was far too little, far too late for the boy that both Matt Murdoch and Daredevil failed to save. After his stint as an Avenger, Bullseye returned to New York to discover that his nemesis Daredevil was now the leader of the Hand. The cocky assassin killed many Hand guards in order to bait Daredevil out of his fortress. However, when Bullseye got his wish, he soon discovered that he was dealing with a very different Daredevil than he was used to, one with all of the skill and abilities as before, but now with unbridled rage and ruthlessness. Daredevil had been heading down a dark path for a while at this point, but it was his interaction with Bullseye which truly cemented him as a villain. Daredevil broke both of his enemy's arms before impaling him with a sigh, much as Bullseye had done to Elektra years earlier. Finally, allowing himself to kill was exactly what was needed to darken the hero's soul enough so that the Beast of the Hand could possess him and raise him to full supervillain status. This act remains the only time the man without fear has intentionally killed someone who wasn't an immediate threat to others. It is also an act that cost him everything. Heather Glenn was a New York socialite who dated Matt Murdoch. Her fun, carefree personality contrasted Matt's serious demeanor, and for a time the two lived a happy, exciting life together. When Heather's father fell under the influence of the Purple Man, however, he began participating in criminal activities and had his reputation destroyed. Though Matt discovered the truth, he was unable to obtain evidence exonerating the man, and eventually Heather's father committed suicide. Heather fell into severe depression and alcohol abuse, and without understanding the full scope of her depression, Matt ended their relationship. Sometime later, Heather reached out to Matt for help, but in doing so caused a woman to die who could have been saved by Daredevil. The next time Heather rang, Matt hung up on her, and in her desperation, Heather took her own life. Matt was plagued with guilt for a long time afterwards, finally understanding the pain that she must have been in and how much she needed him when he made the choice not to be there for her. Daredevil's origin has been told countless times, however this may be in part due to how powerful it is. Matt was raised by his father, Jack, after his mother had walked out on them. His father instilled honor and decency within his son and pushed him to use his head rather than his fists. As a small-time boxer, Jack had little to his name and believed that Matt could do so much better with his life than he ever had. After refusing to throw a fight in order to prove to his son that he had worth, Jack was killed by Roscoe Sweeney. While this would be tragic enough on its own, the event pushed Matt into becoming Daredevil, simultaneously honoring his father while disregarding his most ardent wish, that Matt refrain from violence and devote himself to something greater. Matt was however able to make good on his promise to use his mind to make something of himself, and the violence he reveled in was used to prevent crimes like the one which took his father from him. Elektra first met Matt during their time at Columbia University. Each brought out the wilder side of the other and they soon fell in love. After Elektra's father was murdered, however, she left New York to train with the chaste but soon left their organization and became a member of the Hand. This too proved short-lived, however, and she used her newfound skill to seek employment from Wilson Fisk, becoming his new chief assassin. After much success in this position, she eventually found that her love of Matt prevented her from killing both Fenurick and Foggy Nelson, proving that she was not entirely the monster she had been portraying and revealing a glimmer of hope that Matt and Elektra may have had a future together. This was not meant to be, however, as soon after Bullseye returned to the streets of New York and, determined to regain his crown as the Kingpin's top assassin, murdered Elektra. This act unleashed a darker side to Matt, however, who tracked down the assassin and dropped him from a rooftop, paralyzing him, thereby avenging his lover while still refusing to cross the line she often did. Karen Page spent a period of her life as both a porn star and a drug addict. As such, while tragic, it came as small surprise when a doctor informed her that she was HIV positive. The news hit Karen hard and she returned to New York to be with Matt for what little time she had left. During this time, Matt was involved with a baby who may or may not have been the Antichrist, and the three eventually found themselves in a church where they were attacked by Bullseye, who was looking for the baby. Bullseye began a killing spree during which Karen jumped in front of a projectile meant for Daredevil and died, believing that she was sacrificing what little time she had left so that the man she loved could live a long life. It was later revealed that everything that had came before was in fact a plot by Quentin Beck to drive Daredevil mad, and that Karen was likely in perfect health and it was actually Beck who was dying. Bitter and miserable that his plan had failed, Beck took his own life as Daredevil walked away, choosing not to intervene.